What's up, everyone? Welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast that takes a trip down Philly sports memory lane and asks the question, what if? I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. You can follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Jimbo_Mott. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast, Back to the Future, anywhere you get your podcast from. And I wanted to take a minute. I did this morning on the other podcast and just clear up some confusion that I think some people were having, and partly it's my fault as things kind of morphed. And this is the big podcast, the main one that comes out weekly, usually between 30-45 minutes, where we take a deep dive into a specific topic and examine what if things went the other way, what if this never happened, etc. In the meantime, I got the idea to do a daily This Day in Philly Sports History micropod, and it started off more of just a quick video that I would place on YouTube. And in the meantime, it morphed into a micropod that you can also find under This Day in Philly Sports History anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm still posting on all the social media, and I'm also putting the videos on YouTube, but there are some people that prefer the pod, and so it's a quick 2 to 7 minute pod that just examines specific things happening on that day in Philly sports history. I've been doing a lot of the daily Phillies updates, Eagles updates. I've been making my daily Eagles, or I should say weekly Eagles picks. I'm going to start doing some things with the Sixers as well, so definitely give that a check. Like I said, it's a quick podcast wherever you get your podcasts. However, I am putting the video on YouTube, so go ahead and like and subscribe my YouTube, or if you want, you can. I post it on TikTok as well, so that's why I gave my TikTok handle Jimbo_Mott. So, with the housekeeping things out of the way, the Phillies are getting ready to have first pitch probably in a little less than an hour tonight. Depending on when I get this posted, you might have already known what the outcome of the game is. Hopefully the Phils won. Flyers somehow are keeping up with the Joneses. They're 2-0. They're keeping up with all the Phillies excitement, the Eagles excitement. Sixers are tipping off very shortly as well, which leads me nicely into this segue. And it will be somewhat late with the start of the season, but I have not watched anything yet, so none of my projections or anything are going to be off. But I did want, like similar to what I did with the Eagles earlier on, wanted to give a little Sixers preview of the upcoming season and kind of how I see and where I see things going. But before we get into a Sixers preview, I think we need to take a step back and examine the last few years of the quote-unquote process. For those of you who know me, you know that I've been trusting the process since the very beginning. So it's kind of, to me, getting to the point now where are we in the grand scheme of things? Is the process success? Is it what we expected? And I think if you're solely looking at it to be winning a championship, then yeah, it's definitely a waste, and it hasn't worked. But think about where this team was prior to the process, prior to Sam Hinkie coming in and basically tanking and getting admonished by the league. And now all of a sudden, by the way, everybody's tanking. I was listening to a podcast today on my way home, and basically the guy that was giving the sort of betting predictions and going over some of the teams in both the Eastern and West Conference was basically there was 4 or 5 teams that he said they are absolutely in tank mode, which to be that open about it now after giving the Sixers so much shit for it was kind of ironic. But if the sole goal was to win a championship, it definitely has not been a success yet. That still is open for debate. It still might get there. But where they were and where they're at now, it's like night and day. They weren't a destination where anybody wanted to come to. They were the team that would guys that could make decent money but weren't getting signed with the contenders, they would come to. And they were in what I like to call the purgatory of the NBA, where they weren't good enough to be in the top 5 in the conference, but they were battling. They weren't bad enough to be in the lottery. So they were in that middle area where it was, could you get a 7 seed, maybe win a playoff game or two? Did you just miss out and get like the 12th or the 13th pick? Not really making yourself better. And I will say, from that perspective, I think the process did work, because I mean, I'm excited, and I know people around the country are excited, and you can tell just by the fact that there are 2 games on the NBA schedule tonight, and the Sixers are playing in one of them. So they definitely have a national presence. I also think it's a destination that free agents and people want to come to. And I think part of that comes from Joel Embiid and just his personality, his play, his growth over the years. I will say that they missed on a lot of those draft picks. And I know we have the basically able to say hindsight is 2020 and look at some of those picks and say, oh, you should have gone here, or you should have taken this one. But I think even with that, they definitely could have done a better job with some of those picks. And nothing we can do about it now. It is what it is. And I do think it ties in nicely now to kind of recap some of the past 5 years or so of the process, and just how they're just not quite there. And you go back to 17-18, they closed out strong. Somewhere in that season, they got it together. That was Ben Simmons' rookie year. And as him and Joe started to gel and figure things out, they closed out that season really strong. I forget the exact numbers, but it was something crazy to finish 52-30. And they got knocked out by the Celtics in the second round. I believe that was when LeBron was still on Cleveland and took them to the finals. But no shame in that. I think they were a young team, and hopes were very high for the Sixers. Then the following year, that was the Jimmy Butler year that they were able to make the trade earlier in the season. I think it was roughly about right before the All-Star break, I believe. Brought Jimmy Butler in, and just the way that he and Joe and Ben kind of played together was amazing. We had super high hopes during that whole run. They picked up, they had Tobias Harris was on. So they had like a lot of good pieces, and there's just a lot of excitement. Redick was on that team, and that was the year that I felt they should have won the whole thing. And that was when they lost in the second round to the Raptors. They went 7 games. Kawhi's shot that bounced 18,000 times. And I still think if that went in, that would have been the Sixers winning that title and not Toronto. Nobody's going to tell me any different. And sure, there's so many things that could have gone differently in that series of why they lost. But they win that game, which they should have. It took that lucky bounce. And they're the ones that are and now we're looking at this whole process and this whole team differently. The following year, 1920, was the COVID year. Where they ended up finishing the season in the bubble. Nobody knew what was going on. There was a long layoff. They got basically blown out by the Celtics in the first round. But truthfully, who cares? There wasn't really much to go on for that season. It just was anything after March. It was, who cares? Like, it was a hot mess. I think the biggest impact from that season was the decision to sign Tobias Harris to the max contract instead of Jimmy Butler. There's conflicting reports about whether Jimmy Butler would have come back, whether there were how that all went down, whether they actually offered him a contract, he turned it down. It seemed to me, came out later that him and Joe were friends. Like, there was just something about there. The blame was on Ben Simmons. However it was, it just, something seemed off. But it was still, that's to be determined. And there is going to be a future episode once we get into near the end of football season and we're fully focused on basketball. I do have an episode planned for that. That might be a two-parter. Depending on how this season goes, I might have a guest on for that. There's just so many things that I'm still trying to piece together and still bitter about, to be completely honest with you. But we still had high hopes. I think at least me, and I think everybody kind of thought, okay, because Toby didn't play that bad. It's not like Harris was a shitty player that they gave the money to. So we still had high hopes. And then the following year, I mean, they didn't win 50 games for the first time in a full season in a while, but they got the number 1 seed. That was the season they picked up Seth Curry and Danny Green. Joe and Ben were all-stars again. And things started to go a little south that year, and I definitely have a future episode on this. This could be a 3-parter because I feel some type of way about this. That was the Ben Simmons year, and coming into this year, it had gotten to be basically an issue that he wouldn't shoot, and everybody saw it. And I think the more people pushed him on it, and I don't know if the coaching staff allowed it because Brett Brown was fired after the bubble year, so this was Doc Rivers' first year. So I don't know if Doc didn't push him the way he was, or maybe he did, and that's what started the friction. But whatever it was, by the time they lost to the Hawks in that second round series, the man was shot. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because, again, this could be a whole episode. I get the whole mental health thing. I truly, truly do. I don't like that the way he played it was more of like a crutch. And sure, I get it. As a player, things get in your head. But I was listening to JJ Redick's podcast a couple weeks ago, and Ben Simmons was the guest. And he said, oh, yeah, I should have just dunked it. I didn't realize this. And all of that was legitimate. But I think what pissed me off the most about that whole podcast and that interview was the fact that, one, JJ didn't push him on this. Excuse me. JJ didn't push him on this, and Ben sort of just flipped it under the rug. It wasn't just that play. He hid that entire series for the most part. Like, there were times I was watching with my father-in-law, and then we were down at the beach, and he was coming across midcourt and then going hiding in the corner. So don't tell me it was just that one shot. And I'm going to calm down now because I don't want it to turn into the Ben Simmons podcast because that's coming up. But, excuse me. But we will definitely get into that. But that's when the whole Ben Simmons experiment started to go a little south. And then the following year, last year, it just turned into a fiasco where he was holding out, didn't come. But they were able to trade him for Harden. And again, they still won 51 games again. So they definitely are getting the wins. They're just not making the moves in the playoffs. Embiid got hurt with a cheap shot. It could have gone either way, but everybody's like, oh, I still say it was a cheap shot. And that kind of screwed them up for the Miami series. But one of the good things about that last season was the emergence of Tyrese Maxey as a bona fide player. And I think heading now into this year, we're in a good spot when it comes to that. Man, I apologize. All right, so we touched on this a little bit. Is the process working? Not for a championship level, but like I said, Philly's a destination where people want to come to. You have Embiid, who became a bona fide superstar. And I feel Tyrese Maxey, who is a superstar in the making. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do tonight and the rest of this season. So today's what if is, what if Tyrese Maxey is the missing ingredient and is the third superstar of the big three. You'll have Harden, Embiid, and Tyrese. And I don't know if anybody saw this. I saw it on Twitter, and it was called, I don't know if it was like a candid conversation or something, but Doc was having a conversation with Harden and basically was telling him he needs him to be James Harden, a scorer and not just a facilitator. And get the ball to Joe, play the two-man game with him. He said, facilitate, but get yours. He said, we'll get Tyrese the ball, which if you've seen Tyrese play, I love the way he plays, and he's all over the place. And I feel he's almost maybe not to the level defensively that he was, but he's what I think we all wish Ben Simmons was. So he was telling him, like, you guys are the three. He'll get his. Joe's going to get his. I need you to get yours and facilitate. And then I think what he was saying is, don't be afraid. Like, you're James Harden. Take your shots. He needs him to score 20 points, get 10 assists a game, which I think he's capable of, especially with the way we saw it in glimpse last year and just finally getting it meshed in. So there's three ways to look at this season for the Sixers. I think their ceiling is they can get the number one seed again in the East, 50-plus wins. And I don't even think their ceiling could be 55 wins if all goes well, 58 wins. They could be pushing almost 60 because of the fact with all of the drama and all of the crap that went on with Ben Simmons, they still had 51 wins last year. Prior to that, with Ben not shooting, Joel learning how to be a player and not get hurt, they were still winning 50 games. So you have now the big three and everything going on. To me, the ceiling is 55 whatever wins and the one seed. Embiid comes out, finally is recognized league-wide, gets the MVP. Harden settles into that dual role of a facilitator and a scorer. Maxey takes the next step, which I think he's going to do. The man just works hard. It's all anybody who ever I hear talk about him just says about the work the man puts in the offseason in the gym. So there's no reason why he can't take that next step and explode, which I think he's going to be an all-star this year. Mark my words. And October 18th, 7:22 p.m., Tyrese Maxey will be an all-star. And I think if all of that happens, Tobias plays better. They brought in P.J. Tucker to provide that defensive spark, and I think that's contagious because ultimately a lot of times that's going to be the question mark on this team is defensively. Montrezl Harrell and B-Ball Paul Reed, they provide Embiid with some of those quality rest minutes, and they're able to do some things. And yes, they're a little bit smaller, but it gives them the opportunity and the chance to do what they need to do. Thibault continues to just be a defensive stud and gets more consistent with his jump shot. And what happens is once the big three, Embiid, Harden, and Maxey, start doing their thing, it's going to get contagious, and those things are going to happen. Thibault has also been putting in work. He did a lot of good things in the Olympics and for the Australian national team and everything. The bench is probably going to be the big question mark for this team, but we've seen glimpses of Shake Milton being able to do great things when given the chance. So we need him to be able to do that in a backup role. Their ceiling, they definitely are Eastern Conference champs and title contenders, depending on who comes out of the West. I think this year, for the first year in probably as long as I can remember, the Eastern Conference is probably better right now than, at least in the top, than what the Western Conference is. So you come out of the East, you're going to be battle tested. Who's to say they can't win the title? And I mean, I don't think the ceiling, it's going to be that hard to get to based on what we've seen. On the other side, though, their floor, shit can go bad real quick with this team. If Embiid cannot stay healthy, Harden just gets old. And what we saw last year is just the continuation of his downward spiral. Maxey, which I don't see this happening, very easily could take a step back. And even if those first two things happen, I don't think it matters how well Maxey is playing. PJ Tucker all of a sudden shows his age. Nobody on the bench steps up, which all of this very easily could happen. They're battling between the 6th seed and the play-in tournament. And that is not a place you want to be, because that goes back to the whole NBA purgatory. So where do I think they end up? I think they end up closer to the ceiling. Embiid is going to come out focused. I really think if he doesn't win the MVP this year, the MVP's award is a joke in the NBA then. There's no reason why I don't feel he should have won it last year, except for all the analytical nerds saying, well, he did this. And no, like, use your eyes. Embiid was by far the best player. It wasn't Jokic. It was Embiid. It's a Jokic that he won the MVP. So we'll leave it at that. But I think it's going to be a slow start for them. I do think that it will eventually come together. And based on that whole conversation I saw with Harden and Doc, they're trying. And you saw it during the preseason where there were glimpses of them being unstoppable, defensive playing well, and then there were still some of those things that they needed to work on, which I feel they will. This is their best chance, I feel, since the 18-19 team to win a title. Likely 50 wins is a decent total for them. The Vegas has their total right now at 50.5. I think they go over. I think they get 51, 52. Probably a top 3 or 4 seed. 51 wins last year got them the 4 seed. So you have Boston, you have Miami, you have Milwaukee, you have teams that are hungry, getting ready to step up. Is it going to be the Hawks? Is it going to be the Bulls? Look out for the Pistons this year. I really like the Pistons to take a step forward and battle for that play-in tournament. What are the Knicks going to do? I do think the Nets are going to implode. I think it's just a ticking time bomb, because you have one superstar that's going to be gone next year. You have another superstar who didn't play at all last year. And then you have the other superstar who wants away from the whole situation. So we'll see what happens there. I give them till maybe Christmas or New Year's before shit starts getting crazy there. Hopefully the Sixers will pick up a shooter off the bench at some point. I think that's going to be a must. If shit goes wrong in New Jersey, maybe Seth Curry becomes available. I wouldn't mind having him back on the team. But again, this is their best chance, I feel, since 18-19. And truthfully, it's probably their last chance as the way this team is constructed due to their age, the contracts, and just the way everything is. Don't necessarily think their window is closed. I just think they're going to need to be creative. I do think they finally make it out of the second round of the playoffs this year, make it to the conference finals. Once they get to the conference finals, who knows from there? It depends on who they play, what's going on in Boston. Boston's going to be tough, but they have some injuries that are leading to some big question marks. For my money, I don't see any way, if Joel puts his mind to it, anybody's going to stop them. And so probably the homer pick. But I believed in the process this whole time. This is the last ditch effort for the process, and I'm trusting it. So Sixers all the way this year. Let's go, baby. All right. Before we sign off for tonight, I want to go over something that I've been seeing a lot lately, and rightfully so. Just the state of sports in Philadelphia right now. And a lot has been made of it because you have the Eagles 6-0 going into their bye week. The Phillies making this improbable run to the NLCS. The Sixers with their high expectations. The Flyers with a new coach with low expectations, but have gotten off to a good start already. And Flyers fans are super faithful, so there's always a buzz about them. And I mean, I haven't been to a game, and I'm not that into it, but I know a lot of people are. The Union are decent team this year. I think they're the number 1 seed, and they're going far in their playoffs right now. So is this the golden era or even one of the best years in Philly sports history? Well, based on last year, and the seasons leading up to this point. So from October of 2022 to, let's just say, November of 2021, it's not there yet, but there's potential. The Sixers, Phillies, and Eagles are all in play for at least their conference final. I mean, the Phillies are there. Sixers, I believe, are going to go there. The Eagles, I mean, I think at this point it might be a complete disaster if they don't make it to the NFC Championship game. If the Union count, I believe they're either in their conference semifinals or getting ready for their conference finals. They're close. The Flyers will likely fall back from their two wins in a row now, but with this new coach and young players, who knows? So if this is not the best time in Philly sports history, what was? The best has to be hands down 1980. All four teams appeared in the finals. Unfortunately, only the Phillies won. And they were all, I think it's aggressive to think that this time is, but I like it. And there are some honorable mentions that are pretty close to it. So in 83, you had the Flyers winning their division, the Phillies going to the World Series, and the Sixers winning the championship. The Eagles were just terrible that year. So that's up there. In 2008, all four teams made the playoffs. The Phillies obviously won the title. The Eagles were in the NFC Championship game, which they should have won, and there's definitely a Back to the Future coming on that. I'm still get pissed about that game against the Cardinals. The Flyers lost in the conference finals to the Penguins. Sixers were entering NBA purgatory at that point. They were in between the AI era, and I believe this was when we had I don't know if this was when the whole Andrew Bynum thing happened, or we were still a couple years from that, but it was just not fun at that point. But anyway, so with all of that being said, the bar is not too high. So can we win two titles in one calendar year? For my money, if that happens, obviously would take the cake as the best year in Philly sports history. Could it happen now? Why not? We're very close with the Phillies. We're looking good right now with the Eagles. I already told you I think the Sixers are going to win. Could we go 3? Could we pull LeBron James? Not 1, not 2, not 3. I'm not going to get greedy, but again, don't give me the jinx stuff. Shh, enough with that. I'm sick of it. This is a new era of Philly sports where we're going to be cocky, we're going to be confident, we're going to be Boston. Negadelphia, forget about it. To quote the great Jake Taylor, there's only one way to change this whole negative attitude in Philly. And Phillies, I'm starting with you. Then I'm looking at you Eagles. Then I'm looking at you Sixers. Flyers, you want to jump in? 2. Only way to change it, let's go out and win the whole fucking thing. So Philly fans, you got this. Be happy. Talk shit. Enjoy this moment. We've certainly earned it. And if being a Philly fan has taught us anything, this is probably going to be all gone tomorrow anyway. So let's go enjoy it. All right. There you got. Be sure to follow and like both podcasts. Follow me on Twitter at, you got me all fired up now. I can't talk. Let's go do this. We got a Phillies game in 30 minutes. But follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Jimbo_Mont. Go to the YouTube channel so you can see the video of this podcast and everything. And remember, you have this podcast, Back to the Future. You have my daily one, This Day in Philly Sports History. All good content. And let's do it. Let's go Phils. Let's go Sixers, Flyers, Union. Let's go. Until next time, I'll see you when I see you.